We're going to be in Daniel chapter 11. Daniel chapter 11, verse number 24, if I'm not mistaken. Let me see if I can find my own notes. 14. Excuse me, I was 10 ahead of myself. I like that hazy, lazy, crazy. I have a crazy prayer. I want a Maserati to pull my best boat. That's in a gray area. It's a necessity. We've been in Daniel chapter 11. We've been talking about the king of the north, the king of the south. The king of the north is known by several different titles. The king of the south is known by several different titles. They're also known by a given name or a name that their parents had given them. They have a crown name. I mean, I don't know about you, but it's confusing. I read about Antiochus, and I'm thinking that I'm reading about one, and I'm thinking about a different one. There's at least 4, maybe 5 Antiochus, and they're all from the king of the north, which is Syria. Excuse me, but I don't think Assyria is north, but it is in Bible terms. Okay, Ptolemy. There's several different Ptolemies as well. So it's confusing as to which Antiochus is against which Ptolemy, or vice versa. So I'm trying to, in my own mind, settle who's who in the zoo. Okay, so this is where we're at. So hopefully if I get off track and you're wondering which Antiochus or which Ptolemy it is, please stop me and ask, and I probably won't know, but I'll help. Verse number 14. By the way, the purpose in this going through these details of the book of Daniel chapter 11 is there are a number of different prophecies, and they're detailed. You'll notice that they're not like some horoscope developer, giving out broad-based verbiage that could or not be applied in any different circumstance. These are very specific, very detailed. And the purpose of this is to show the world this is the Word of God. Brother Troy was telling me, and I can't remember how many it was, but I think it was like it's said to be 135 different prophecies that have already come true in 35 verses. 135 and 35 verses. Mathematically, that's 1 with 135 zeros after it, chance of happening. That's not chance. That can't possibly be. The Bible is God's Word, and it's not just any book. Verse number 14. And in those times there shall many stand up against the king of the south, that's Ptolemy, also robbers of thy people, shall exalt themselves to establish the vision, but they shall fall. This is Ptolemy. This is Ptolemy Philopator is his name. He was a very benevolent or very kind king to the Jews. He liked the Jews. He saw the Jews as a source of money knowledge. Sometimes we stereotype people. Often we stereotype people, not sometimes, often we do. And one of the stereotypes of a Jew is, well, they got money. Well, they didn't just get money, they've worked at it. And this particular king, like the Jews, he encouraged them to move to Alexandria, which was the capital of Egypt at that point in time. It wasn't Cairo. Okay, so that was the capital of Egypt. And it was named after, Alexandria was named after Alexander the Great. Okay, so remember, we're dealing with the Ptolemies and we're dealing with the Antiochs, but they're all Greeks. They're all Greeks and from a Grecian background. Okay. This kind Ptolemy, this Philopator, died. He passed away. He was replaced by another Ptolemy. This second Ptolemy did not like the Jews at all. As a matter of fact, he saw them as a source of money. So what he did was he basically murdered them and took their riches and took their wealth. There was a little fellow in World War II that did the same thing to the Jews. Murdered 6 million of them and took their wealth. Didn't like them, saw them only as a source of money. The passage that we just read, verse number 14, said also, in the middle of the verse, it said, also the robbers of thy people shall exalt themselves to establish the vision, but they shall fall. This second Ptolemy robbed God's people and took God's people's lives. Look at verses 15 and 16. So the king of the north, this is Antiochus, shall come and cast up a mount and take the most fenced cities, and the arms of the south shall not withstand, neither his chosen people, neither shall there be any strength to withstand. But he that cometh against him shall do according to his own will, and none shall stand before him. And he shall stand in the glorious land, which by his hand shall be consumed. Who are we talking about here? We're talking about Antiochus, king of the north, from Syria. He is against Egypt. Egypt is his deadly foe, and he wants to go invade Egypt. But the problem is that Egypt is a ways away. He has to travel with his army, and bear in mind, back then they didn't have C-17s or cargo planes or whatever. They didn't have ships like ocean liners. They had to go overland for the most part, and they had a long way to go. Between Syria and Egypt, look on your map, is Israel. They took it from both sides. The Egyptians claimed dominion over Israel, rule. The Egyptians had put in fortresses. They had put in manned fortresses with manned armed guards to protect their property, to protect their land, and to use Israel as a buffer between the north and the south. So we see our friend here, Antiochus. He comes into the land of the people of Israel, and he withstands the chosen people. That's the people of Israel. That's in verse number 15. There won't be any strength to withstand him. They won't be able to stop him. But those that come against him but he that cometh against them shall do his own will, and none shall stand before him, and he shall stand in the glorious land. The glorious land is Israel, the land of Israel, which by his hand shall be consumed. He took all the resources that he could get his hands on and left the land just trashed. Sign of a conqueror. Conqueror not caring about anything at all about the people of the land, seeing them only as an object of wealth, an object of power. Antiochus was in Israel with every intention of going further down into raid and invade the land of Egypt, where Ptolemies reigned. But he got wind at the last minute before he started to invade the land. He got wind that the Egyptians had made an ally, a new partner. Interestingly enough, the new partner was Rome. We started off chapter 11, And you think about this. We started off chapter 11 with with the Babylonians being conquered by the Medes. Okay, then the Medes in turn were conquered by the Greeks with the four wings that went in four different directions: the Ptolemies, the Seleucids, so forth and so on. Now Rome rears its ugly head. I can't talk today. We see all four kingdoms, all four empires mentioned in this book. Remember, Daniel prophesied this in 535 to 550 BC. This prophecy that he gives will go all the way down to being fulfilled just before the birth of Christ. Prophecy is foretelling what God would have message to be told, foretelling the future. And he does it time after time after time after time. Verse number 17. He also shall set his face to enter with the strength of his whole kingdom, and upright ones with him. And thus shall he do, and he shall give him the daughter of women, corrupting her, but she shall not stand by his side, neither before him. What does this mean? What actually happened in this case. Antiochus decided he wanted to go ahead and enter into the land of Egypt, but he had a problem because he knew that Egypt was strong. Egypt with Rome was unbeatable. He didn't dare go do that, so he didn't invade them with an army. He used another tactic. It's called politics. It says that this Antiochus and the Antiochus to follow were real good at flattery. What's flattery? Compliments, usually lies. Most often, aiming at somebody's pride. Flatteries. He was a smooth talker. He was what we used to call in Vietnam, we call him a slicky boy. A cheat, a liar, using subterfuge, using influence. You know, we have those same situations today. We have politicians. Antiochus decided not to invade with an army. He invaded with diplomacy. And he went in and he made agreements with people. He bribed people. He influenced people in many other different ways. He told them, you do this for me and I'll put you in a position of power over here. Think about our politicians today. Think about that. What kind of tactics do they use? We used to call them dirty politics. That term still should be applied. Nothing is new under the sun, is what it says in the yeah, exactly. Yeah, they come in with things that sound good, but there's an ulterior motive underneath. Let me give you a couple of examples that I found. Any of you here own a gun? What does the government want to do? They want to take away your gun. They want to take away your gun to make the world safe. That's not why they want to take away that's not their reason to really want to take away your weapons. You know? They want to tax the rich and give to the poor. There's a problem with that. What's the problem with that? You're taking away fundamental freedoms and making yourself totally dependent not upon anything else but the government. What are they after? They're after control. Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Antiochus was a politician, and I use that in every negative sense of the word. It talks about in these verses, he will, where am I at here? Verse 17. He will come in with the strength, to enter with the strength of his whole kingdom and upright ones. That's a Hebrew term, and a Hebrew phrase, which means by trickery or by stealth, by dishonesty, by intrigue. So it's not a positive thing in the Hebrew language. Thus shall he do. And he shall give him the daughter of women, corrupting her, but she shall not stand by on his side, neither be with him. Antiochus decided he was going to take his own daughter. Her name happened to be Cleopatra, not the Cleopatra with Antony and Caesar, but an earlier Cleopatra. He took his own daughter and he gave his own daughter in marriage to the king of the South's son. He corrupted her. We just read that. The word was corrupted, corrupting her. What was he corrupting her? He was training her. He was teaching her to be like him, to be devious, to be a liar, to be a truce breaker. She, Cleopatra, and young Ptolemy were about 12 years of age when they married. The marriage was consummated, and they had a child. Antiochus' scheme and plan and plotting through all this whole process and promoting this whole idea was he knew that the fruit of that union would be heir to the throne of Egypt. He wanted his daughter to double-cross her husband so that he in turn could take over as regent, the one in power, for her son. He put his own daughter in a position of being bait, being a prostitute. I don't get it. To me, it's so repulsive that I can't even believe it. The interesting thing about the story is, she, Cleopatra, told her husband Ptolemy what was going on. Ptolemy was a young boy. He wasn't very old at the time. He was in his teens. What he did is he in turn went to the Romans, who he had been allied with, and told the Romans what Antiochus was attempting. They in turn formed a strong navy. They already had a strong navy. And they put a leader in charge of that fleet by the name of Scipio, S-C-I-P-I-O. Scipio happened to be a member of Caesar's own household. Scipio led that fleet against the fleet of Antiochus and just beat the tar out of them, okay? The defeat was so strong, was so great, that Antiochus returned from his venue in Egypt back to his hometown of Syria, Antioch, Syria, and sued for peace. He went to the Romans and he said, I want peace. The Romans said, okay, you can have peace. All the lands that you've conquered, we want them back. Oh, by the way, war costs money. And because war costs money, we want you to repay for the cost of the war. That happened to the Germans in World War I. They were defeated. They had to pay reparations for the cost of the war of World War I. It broke them. Antiochus was a defeated foe. When he heard about all this, and he understood what the problem was, he decided to go back, like I said, to his hometown. On the way back, he happened to stop in Jerusalem because the Jews, somehow or another, got rumor that because the Syrian navy was defeated by Rome, that Antiochus was dead. So they partied. They celebrated in the streets. Antiochus heard about this. He had just come off a defeat, a humiliating defeat, and he had gone into Israel, and he entered into the city of Jerusalem, and he created havoc. I don't recommend this book I'm about to tell you about, but it's in the Apocrypha. It's called 2nd Maccabees. 2nd Maccabees is a history about what happened with Antiochus coming in and defeating the people of Jerusalem and how he did it. And if I'm not mistaken, I may be a little wrong on my numbers, but I don't think so. Second Maccabees talks about 80,000 Jews being killed, 40,000 being sent into exile, and another 40,000 being put in enslavement. Those are large numbers. Now that's all according to the book of 2nd Maccabees, which I said I don't recommend, but that's what, it's part of the Jewish Apocrypha. Pretty serious situation. Look at verse number 19. Then he shall turn his face toward the ford of his own land, but he shall stumble and fall and not be found. And there shall stand up in his estate a raiser of taxes in the glory of the kingdom. But within a few days he shall be destroyed, neither in anger nor in battle. This Antiochus came back from his battle. He invaded Jerusalem. He killed a bunch of Jews. But he still had this burden put upon him by Rome to pay the war debt. He didn't have enough money to pay the war debt. So what he did was he went out and he went to the temples of his own gods, his own false gods, and he raided each temple and took all the gold and all the money that he could get out of the temple to help pay the tax that he owed the Romans. He went to the temple of Bel in Elymas, Elymas, however you pronounce that. He went there to take the treasury from the temple of Bel, this false god, and one of the priests of Bel murdered him. So Antiochus was killed by a priest of his own false religion. His son took over in his place. And what his son did is his son still had the debt hanging over his head. He looked around and he couldn't figure out what to do, so he decided that he was going to go into Jerusalem, which had just been raided, just been destroyed, people had been murdered. Going to go to Jerusalem with a tax collector, and he was going to raid the Jewish temple in Jerusalem. If we look back in verse number 20, Then shall stand up in his estate a raiser of taxes in the glory of the kingdom. But within few days he shall be destroyed, neither in anger nor in battle. He sent his tax collector, his tax assessor, his ambassador, whatever you want to call this guy, to Jerusalem to raid the temple. But while he was in the process of doing this, he got mysteriously sick. Circumstances he couldn't figure out. And he died from his sickness. Some say that the reason that he died was his own tax collector poisoned him. He didn't die in battle. He wasn't openly assassinated, but he died of mysterious circumstances. His own tax collector poisoned him and absconded with some of the funds. This is a real interesting family. I mean, you know, I don't recommend soap operas in any way, shape, form, or matter, but this is a soap opera for sure in all of its aspects. Oh, some practical applications for what we've been studying. We've been studying all about intrigue. We've been studying all about the king of the north, the king of the south, fighting each other. We've been talking about just blatant sin that goes on. What are some practical applications? I got these practical applications from Bo Wagner's book on Daniel. Number one, don't turn against the Jews. It'll cost you. Number two, don't trust the best intentions of men. Number three, teach your children to be honest. Deceit will often backfire on you. Number four, your first loyalty outside of to your God is to your spouse. Don't mess with God's people or God's man. I thought that was interesting. When this second guy died, this second Antiochus died, the next in line was his own son, a fellow by the name of Demetrius. Demetrius was supposed to take over, but his throne was stolen from him by Antiochus' own brother. And he became known as Antiochus Epiphanes. So this Antiochus Epiphanes came to the throne not by legal means, but by trickery, by flattery, by smooth talking. The verse says, verse 21, and in his estate, or in the place of, shall stand up a vile person. Notice what the Bible says about Antiochus Epiphanes. He says he's a vile person, to whom they shall not give honor of the kingdom, but he shall come in peaceably and obtain the kingdom by flatteries. He was a smooth-talking politician. And with the arms of a flood shall they be overthrown from before him, and shall be broken, yea, also the prince of the covenant. Antiochus Epiphanes, those that were against him, and there were many that were against him within his own government, within his own land, all those that come against him were bowled over by his power. What are we talking about here about this prince of the covenant in verse number 22? Any ideas? Who are the covenant people? The Jews. So it's a prince of the Jews, prince of the covenant. So a prince of the covenant, who's a prince of the covenant? The high priest, is he not? Would not the high priest be the prince of the covenant? So this high priest is going to be overthrown. Yea, also, let's read it again. And with the arms of the flood shall they be overflown from before him, and shall be broken, yea, also the prince of the covenant. What happened here was Epiphanes wanted to be in control. He wanted power more than he wanted money. He wanted money too, but he was more concerned with power. Kind of like the Antichrist will be more concerned with power than with money. If you have power, you're going to have money, political power. In that vein, look at our politicians. I can think of one who's been in government for 47 years, has done absolutely nothing in 47 years, and yet is a multi-millionaire on a government salary. How's that happen? The prince of the covenant. A man named Jason bribed Epiphanes. He said, I want to be the high priest in Jerusalem. So he bribed Epiphanes, and Epiphanes put him in the role of being the high priest. Understand that this heathen, this pagan, is determining who's going to be the high priest in God's temple. That's blasphemy. But true to form, Epiphanes heard that there was another man who wanted the high priestship more than Jason did. His name was Menelaus. Menelaus was willing to pay more. So what did Epiphanes do? He took the money from Menelaus, kicked Jason out, and went back on his own word. Politician. Epiphanes is a picture. He's a forerunner. He's a type. He's an example of what the Antichrist will be. We've been through 20 some odd verses of chapter 11 so far, and it's talked all about history. We're going to get up to verse number 35, and from 35 on, we're going to talk about what's coming in the future. And what's coming in the future not only is in Daniel 35 through 45, but it also is in Matthew 24, where Jesus talked about these different things. Matthew 24 and Daniel 11 are very, very similar in these last parts. Let's call it a day. Brother, would you lead us in prayer?